Good evening, all. Today we are going to have a seminar organized by Commercial Law, Economic Advisory, and Pure Cooperative of ICI Committee. I, C. Amita Bissa, is the moderator of the webinar, and we are delighted to welcome you all in the webinar being organized by CCLEA and NPO Committee of ICI. It's my pleasure to be moderator in webinar on professional opportunities for CAs in ADR. On 15th May from 5 p.m. we are starting it, being organized by Committee on Commercial Laws, Economic Advisories, and NPO Cooperative of ICI, as already stated. In a short while, we will start the webinar, and I would like to apprise you about CCLEA and NPO Committee. This committee is focused to encourage chartered accountants to shape strategy and policy that unlocks economic, financial, and social values while combining analytical foresight with commercial acumen. One of the core areas of this committee is to serve the multifunctional task of analysis, knowledge dissemination, inputs to regulators on policy formulations, to develop and publish technical guidance, background materials, and to create awareness for professional opportunities for chartered accountants in commercial law, economic advisories, and NPO cooperatives. Our eminent speaker will talk on professional opportunities for CAs in ADRs in this webinar, and we hope that all that same shall be useful to the members. So let me have this privilege to introduce today's learned speaker, CA Neeraj Khocharji. He is accomplished chartered accountant and a company secretary with 12 years of expertise in valuation, forensic accounting, damage assessments, and transaction advisory. Holding certificates as Certified Fraud Expert ICI, he has been a key player in financial due diligence and dispute resolution across diverse industries. Currently, as a partner at Accuracy, he is specialized in high stake arbitration and litigation, having provided expert reports for major disputes under Singapore International Arbitration Centers, International Chamber of Commerce, London Court of International Arbitration, and India ad hoc arbitration matters. His engagement span across sectors such as energy, fintech, infrastructure, luxury automobiles, media, and entertainment, where he has led financial investigation and quantification of damages. Before Accuracy, he started his career with PwC in assurance and later joined KPMG India's transaction service from 2014, focusing on financial due diligence for major cross-border transactions. His leadership in forensic investigation has uncovered fraudulent accounting practices and financial misappropriations, making him a sought after expert in financial risk management. His extensive experience in expert determination, forensic investigation, damage assessments make him uniquely positioned to provide practical insight and strategic perspective on navigating ADR processes effectively. This session promises to be both informative and engaging and offering valuable takeovers for professional, legal advisors, and corporate stakeholders. So I invite him for his deliberation and handing over the session to him. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amita, for the kind introduction. Hello, good evening to the fellow community members. Uh, the idea for today's session is just to appraise and share with everyone as to what I do and what I have found over the years as to the opportunities that are available for chartered accountants in ADR forum. Just to set the context, I would want to start with just briefly touching about what ADR is and where and under which scope we can find some sort of areas where we can play critical roles. And I try to take some real life examples and give some practical solution as to how we can approach it. Happy to answer any questions that might arise after. So quickly starting, I would want to take you through a presentation. If someone could confirm that the screen is visible. Perfect. So, as stated out by Amita, the the topic is around what are the opportunities that chartered accountants can look in the ADR world. So, the very first point is to understand, what ADR is, and where all we would be able to position ourselves. So, as a very first step, I'll go deep dive into what disputes, when disputes arise, and how we end up in an ADR forum. But in a very layman's term, ADR is a process of settling a dispute outside court. So if you were to look at a conventional mechanism when there is a dispute between two parties, historically, conventionally, the matter could go to, let's say, any given court at any given level, be it district, high court, supreme court, etc. An alternate dispute mechanism is a mechanism which uses a process to settle the dispute between parties individual outside court. And this is something that was a long time coming, specifically speaking about India. And all of us would know how our judiciary system is heavily burdened with the number of cases across the length and breadth of issues outstanding. Some numbers indicate that more than 30 million cases are there which are pending with the judiciary. So obviously, and as a country grows, businesses grows, you need to find alternate mechanisms to settle these disputes very quickly, effectively, and something which is within the purview of law as well. So that is where the alternate dispute resolution came into being. Now there are several charters and acts that has been set out within various schemes of ADR, which we will briefly touch during the course of this webinar. Now we understand now what alternate dispute resolution means, right? The two parties have a disagreement that is being settled outside court. Now, settling outside of court is not just you have to have a formal mechanism, you have to have some rules, you have to have some eventuality about it. So there are several rules, several mechanisms that have been set out, which will be part of today's session, which monitor these ADR processes. And once we discuss and have a very brief background about what these processes are, where all these dispute resolutions take place, uh, we would move on to the next and the most important bit here is where all can we find ourselves as chartered accountants to play a critical role in these situations. And I'll also want to share some of my experience that I have gained over the years on essentially working substantial part of my career on ADR topics. So let's get going. The first thing that I really want to touch upon is what really a dispute is, right? Even before going into an alternative dispute resolution mechanism, dispute could be anywhere. Where two friends fighting to discussion within a family member. What we are here concerned about when there is and there is a clear cut definition as per international trade laws as well. When two or party disagree on a particular terms, obligation, and interpretation of an arrangement that they have entered into, there rises a dispute. And if you look at what I've laid down here as per UNICITRAL, it's more or less the same thing when there are two parties or more parties arising from a legal or a contractual issue involves claims against one another. It is expected that there is a conflict and it needs to be resolved. Now, what are the types of disputes? And this is very important to understand from our perspective as to where we can play some role. So there are multiple types of dispute, as I was saying earlier. There could be financial and commercial disputes. There could be disputes relating to operations, and I will take you through some examples for each of those. There could be legal disputes as to the legal interpretation of a contract, of an agreement between the parties, and then there could be social disputes, which is not necessarily something that I would get into today. So, touching upon the first two topics, and let's take some example. Um, the first one would be around a financial dispute or a contractual dispute. So assume, the example would be, and this is an example that I've worked on. So assume that there are two parties, they have entered into a contract for let's say construction of a highway. Now, the highway is was supposed to be completed in 2 years, but the project has taken 5 years. Now there has been a delay of 3 years, and this is while the terms and the commercials were agreed upon on the basis of 2 years of work. Now someone needs to be held responsible, and someone needs to pay for it, right? Now, if the other party who's employed the contractor is not ready to pay, the matter will go into dispute. So this is a dispute that is arising out of a contract and the contractual obligations, where the party would claim for delay and extra costs that they have incurred. Let's say there could be another kind of disputes where there is a shareholder disagreement, right? uh, where there are minority shareholders, and who allege that the valuation that they've been paid as part of a transaction is not appropriate. Or there could be disputes arising out of contractual arrangement of a shareholders agreement, where there are some earn-out clauses, and we will discuss those in detail, which what these situations are. And then there could be multiple other disputes which could relate to operations. Let's say there is a substandard delivery, substandard products that has been delivered, or services that have been delivered. There has been disagreement as to what was the mode and manner of a particular product or service were to be affected. So these are some of the kinds of disputes that arise. Now the parties eventually want to get a solution, right? It is not for businesses to continue fighting and running towards an endless process of not getting, not getting a resolution. So, and hence the ADR is a very important mechanism which helps parties to quickly resolve the dispute and continue with their business, and continue with the value accretive parts of their business. Um, so, in all this scheme, before I proceed ahead, the important point to understand is, so there has been a dispute. Now, who are the actors that would come into picture, right? So, if the parties have entered into, let's say, dispute, and they're not agreeing on a certain point, there are two routes available, either as per their agreement, and it's a very important part of any dispute or any arrangement, is there should be a mechanism that is set out in the agreement. Like, and this is something that we see very often, that you envisage at the time of entering into an agreement, that how will you manage if things go south, if things don't go as planned, or things go vary. So there is a dispute settlement mechanism set out in most of the contractual agreement. And in doing so, you agree that in future, whenever such situation comes, you will use that channel to settle that dispute. And more, the parties, large international parties, Indian parties, are now agreeing that we settle it through alternate dispute resolution mechanism, because it's quicker, it's fast, it's quicker, it's cost effective, and it leads to continuity of business, and it is not something that drags on for several years. Now, once this has happened and it is agreed between the parties, when the actual dispute happens, this clause gets invoked. Now, who are the actors in this particular situation, right? There are these two parties, or three parties, or n number of parties that might be there. Then they would need some sort of legal support for interpretation of what the legal arrangement were, and filing of different claims and running of the legal processes. And then you would, when the parties have put forth their particular case, this would need to be heard by a set of judges, right? Now, when it is in an ADR mechanism, there are multiple ways when these could be heard of, or these could be settled. Excuse me. So, and the idea of today's session is to understand those avenues, and where we can play a role as part of chartered accountant community. So again, some practical example that I wanted to share as to dispute, and this is something that I have dealt with myself. Is, let's say there was a real estate developer, and he agreed, to a profit sharing terms with an investor who had invested for the residential development. but the project was never completed on time. The investor lost huge amount of money, and then he raised a claim against the developer. Now, the arbitration, it didn't went into the courts, but they opted for the arbitration route, and the entire process was settled very quickly, and the dispute was resolved. And I will definitely touch upon on what I did and what our role could be. Again, similar situations could arise when there are cross-border shipments, there are delays, there are substandard products, there are non-fulfillment of obligations. So we discussed what are disputes. Now, how dispute escalate into, let's say, alternate dispute mechanism and various part of that. So within an alternate dispute mechanism, there are three primary mode of operations. One is either you go into arbitration, wherein it is an off-court formal process of settling a dispute under certain set of laws which has been agreed between the party, or it goes into mediation. Mediation is something where two parties appoint a mediator to help them come to a solution. It is not the mediator's job to opine on what the solution is, but help the parties to come to a solution. And the third option is conciliation, where there is a conciliator who is appointed. It is much like mediation, but the difference is the conciliator helps to come at provides a solution and try and bring the parties to agree to that solution. So within an alternate dispute settlement mechanism, we discussed we are moving out of the court. When we move out of the court, these are the three options that we have. Either we go to the arbitration route, which is governed by the Arbitration Act, or we go Arbitration and Conciliation Act, or we go to mediation, which there's a separate Mediation Act as well. Now, which route will be taken is that is what I wanted to really emphasize earlier, is driven by what the agreement between the parties have been at the time of entering into the transaction. And that is where this drafting of these agreements and envisaging how you would deal in with a dispute becomes very important on any transaction, on any arrangement that we work on. Within these three things, I think arbitration takes the biggest pie, while it's always evolving, and there are cases that are being put forth both by government and private players to put mediation also as a forefront. But as things stand, arbitration in India and internationally is one of the biggest and the most preferred route of alternate dispute mechanism. Just to repeat myself, arbitration is nothing but an off-court formal process which is followed under a set of rules and regulations where party go to settle their dispute. It is generally heard by a tribunal, which could be a single tribunal or a multiple tribunal, who hears both sides and come to a conclusion based on his judgment and passes an award. Again, whether it will be one tribunal member, three tribunal member, it is has to be agreed between the parties at the time of agreement, if not at the time when the dispute begins. It is very important to understand that what are the types of disputes that cannot be arbitrated. And one could be very obvious when there are matters relating to national importance, there are matters relating to insolvencies. These matters you cannot take out of court, right? Something like, let's say, criminal offenses, guardianship, and all those matters. These matters are not covered under the aegis of arbitration or, let's say, mediation in this case, but are covered through conventional mechanism. What we are really talking about are the business disputes, commercial disputes, shareholders disputes, which are relevant. So all of this was very important, assuming that not everyone would be aware of what an alternate dispute mechanism is and when it kicks off. um, Amongst the three types of alternate dispute mechanisms that I set out, a chartered accountant can play a critical role in all the three of the mechanisms, and I will discuss in detail as to how and when. um, So let's first get into arbitration being the most critical one and most used manner of alternate dispute resolution. When we speak about arbitration, there are two kinds of arbitration essentially. One is what is called as institutional arbitration, and one which is called as ad hoc arbitration. Institutional arbitration, as the name suggests, it's an arbitration which is governed under rules of certain organization, be it an Indian organization, be it an international organization. For example, there is Delhi International Court of Arbitration, there is Nani Palki Arbitration Center, there is Mumbai International Arbitration Center. All of these are Indian institutions which has their own set of rules to cater to arbitrations and disputes that go into arbitrations between parties. So all of these fall within the institutional arbitration. More and more, when there are international parties, parties want to have an international institution which can govern such disputes. So there are several institutions which are international who also cater to alternate dispute resolution mechanisms and set out their own rules. Again, as I said earlier, all of this is agreed between the party at the time of their entering into a transaction or an arrangement. What is an ad hoc arbitration? An ad hoc arbitration is parties don't follow any institution, but they have agreed that they want to undertake arbitration. And it is then, let's say in India, if it is an ad hoc arbitration, they agree that they will themselves appoint the arbitrators. Agree, each party could nominate one, or they could mutually agree on the arbitrator they want to select, and that is followed under the Arbitration Rule Arbitration Act that has been set out by the country. So just for as I was telling you, some of the institutions that we can see here is, if you can see that there is LCAI, which is London Court of Arbitration. There is American Arbitration Association, Singapore Arbitration, International Chambers of Commerce for Court of Arbitration. These are some of the international ones. This is important and very prominent. Why we are sitting in India and talking about these international arbitration centers and institutions? More and more, as the economy is opening, more and more when there are international parties investing into India, international parties having transaction with Indian parties, arrangement with Indian parties, these agreements, they want to have a neutral location or an international institution to solve disputes that might arise. And that is where there is always a substantial part of Indian disputes that goes into these international arbitration center. And if you look at their statistics, you will eventually see that India is always amongst the top 5 or top 10 users of these international arbitration centers and institutions, because Indian parties are now so deeply entrenched in global economic scenario that there are substantial arrangement that leads and these disputes that leads are led outside from an outside institution. Now, coming to some of the Indian institution, as you can see, there's Mumbai Center for International Arbitration, Nani Palki, there is ICA, and so on. So there are quite a few institutions that has been put in place. Which route that one takes is obviously agreed at the time of entering into the transaction. Um, Again, we'll touch very briefly because it's important for us to know what are the stages to really know where we can fit in. So the first stage when you enter into arbitration is a pre-arbitration, when the parties have an agreement which says they'll arbitrate if there is a dispute. They select an arbitrator and discuss the mannerism on how it will be conducted. So once all of this is agreed, there are certain legal steps. The matter goes into the commencement stage when the notice of arbitration is given by one party to another. Then there is a response. The tribunal is formed. The hearings happen. Pleadings happen. The matters go into evidence, where the tribunal seeks for evidence, be it written, document, or expert evidence. And then there is final hearings and statements, the deliberation by the tribunal, and then there is a stage, award stage. A lot of the part of this work is done by the legal fraternity, but several part, be it appointment as a tribunal, experts, and all of this we'll be covering subsequent slide, is where chartered accountants are imperative and very important actors in these mechanisms. Finally, and I've touched on this, not spend too much time. Why people have now started choosing ADR is obviously it's cost effective. You have time efficient because you obviously comparatively you get it done in a lesser time. There is confidentiality that is maintained. It is flexible. The notion it is neutral and you have control, and the outcome or the award is sustainable. Again, we've touched this briefly when I started. Why ADR in India is on the rise is there is seriously overcrowded judicial system, and there is the need of the hour to have an alternate mechanism which lessens the burden of the judicial system and acts as a quasi judicial body. uh, Again, I've touched on this that there are large number of global transaction cross border activity happening, and international investors, businessmen don't want to go into the court route but want to settle or want to do it in a more efficient manner, which is why they choose alternate dispute mechanism. uh, Even litigation and the courts, as we all know, could continue for years, and it comes at its own heavy costs, which is both in terms of money and time. And then obviously in today's day and age, you need things to be resolved quickly rather than the time it takes. So now coming to the most interesting and important part, is how and where does a CA fit in, right? So we've discussed everything, quickly summarizing that what is a dispute, what is an ADR, what is a within an ADR an arbitration setup, what are the different stages. All of this is the premise to where we'll come in. Now, before we go into where we come in, I'll not run the question and answer today in this webinar, but I want to take a step back and share with you guys, which I'm sure all of us in the webinar would agree is what are the skills that a chartered accountant generally brings to the table in any situation. Not necessarily let's forget about the dispute, but chartered accountancy prepares us for multiple things, and some of the core competence that a chartered accountant has, I would personally categorize in these five categories. One and foremost is having a technical and analytical skill to analyze financial statement, financial documents, financial statements, be it beyond that contractual documents, and having an understanding of compliance and entire compliance and financial ecosystem, and then summarizing complex issue in a most simplify and analytical manner. So I think that is one of the core skill set that we bring into the table. With that, I would also say is the technical knowledge of of financial regulation, tax regulation, companies regulation. We have we've been throughout the course really in detail. We get into the nitty gritties of Companies Act, Income Tax Act, financial statements, all the accounting standards. So we have a broad range of understanding of varied technical domains, which is very different than other courses which are streamlined in a particular specialization. So this is something which is very critical to what chartered accountants are trained in. We are trained to do. Negotiations and mediation, it's also part of a lot of work that we do with our clients, auditors, and create and various exchanges that we have, be it at tribunal levels, appellate bodies, and different forums there where chartered accountants are representing their clients. And last two, these are a bit softer skills, I would say, but obviously we learn how to manage documents as part of audit, how to make sense out of different documents that could not be linked by a naked eye or someone who doesn't have an understanding of how a trail works within a financial transaction. And this is something that is it is very important, is within our code of conducts. We are always, and the way we have been brought forward as a profession is to be ethical in decision making, be it our audit profession or be it any work that we do. as part of chartered accountant. So all of these are the core competence and the skills that a chartered accountant already possesses, right? Now, if I look at it, uh, if you were to further summarize it, obviously we can do very well with financial reasoning. We know how valuations and different avenues work. We have analytical skills and analytical qualities that we discussed, and we build expertise within a certain domain as we progress in our career. Now, all of these areas could come in handy in ADR, and this is where I go into the next chapter on what are the opportunities that CAs can look into ADR within with the skill set that we have. First and foremost is as an arbitrator itself, arbitrator, mediator, conciliator. So, and that is why the entire backdrop was very important for this conversation. Is so we've understood that, as an alternate dispute resolution, the matter between the parties have gone into dispute and they want to go into arbitration. Now, the very first step that I was telling you, the parties need to agree as to who will be the person who will be arbitrating or mediating or conciliating. Now, when selecting that, the parties, and if you put themselves in their shoe, need to select the best possible person who can take an impartial decision, who can understand the facts of the matter, and can come to a conclusion which is in accordance with law. Now, what we discussed a very short while ago was what are the skill sets that we possess, right? And that is where, I feel a CAs as arbitrator is very underrated, and there are several benefits of, CAs who can be part of these arbitration panel or judges or as an arbitrator presiding over matters when there is a dispute. Now we have to tread this very carefully, right? Now we know, we are very good in financial analysis. We have full understanding of, how a financial issue or a transaction work. But for all of the CA community, we may not have the same depth of legal knowledge as to what are the various laws in place, what are the nitty-gritties within a law, because we don't practice law. So that is why there is always a mix of, panel members, a mix of arbitration within an arbitration mix of arbitrators who bring in diverse skill set. If you look at an Indian scenario, most of the arbitrators, and it is a fact as we stand today, are retired judges. And these judges who have served High Court, Supreme Court, who have had years of experience of running the judicial process, and they now become arbitrator after retirement, basically running the same process outside court. Now, the challenge here is, if you follow the same process, if you follow the same sort of guidance which they did in the court, you will end up in the you'll end up with the same issues, right? So that is where, there is an increasing awareness in the market that you need to bring in specialization, and those specializations should be linked to the kind of dispute. So suppose if there is a dispute around, let's say, for a forensics or a fraud or accounting fraud, now a judge may not be able to understand the actual nitty gritty of what goes in an accounting fraud. He would understand about all the legalities, but if there is someone who's bringing in that lens of knowing how a accounting transaction operates, that is always a value add. So that is where, CAs as an arbitrator can play a critical role in certain kinds of dispute, be it relating to financial disputes, be it relating to, uh, let's say, large construction dispute which involves cost claims, be it shareholders dispute, M&A dispute, etc., etc. And how do we go about doing this, right? So it's easy to say that CA can be an arbitrator, but it's a very, very coveted role, right? You need to be experienced, you need to be just, you need to be equitable, and you need to understand how law works so that you are able to deliver an impartial opinion. In doing so, there are several methods and there are several bodies who have set up these courses for understanding on how to become an arbitrator. In fact, there is a course by ICAI itself, which I completed, which is on for becoming an arbitrator and conciliator. You get a certification course where you understand on how the Arbitration Act works, how the arbitration process works, and how the entire ecosystem is set up. It is very important if you want to become and pursue a career as an arbitrator, that you have to have substantial experience behind you as well. There are these bodies that I had mentioned earlier. They also empanel, like there is an Indian. Just taking a step back and going to that particular slide. Uh, if you look at Indian Council of Arbitrators, if you look at DIAC, all of them welcome, and there are chartered accountants who are enlisted as panel of arbitrators. But they have their set of rules that they want the chartered accountants to be fulfilling. Should have minimum years of experience, be it 10, 15 years, whatever is defined. You should have worked on certain number of matters relating to disputes, and so on and so forth. So becoming an arbitrator is one of the most I would say relevant route, but it is one of the most difficult route as well, because you need to spend some good amount of time within the ecosystem, understanding what it takes to be an arbitrator, understanding what the Arbitration Act is all about, and being applicable, being fit to qualify as an arbitrator, where you will be sitting alongside ex judges, retired judges. You will be sitting alongside technical experts who have spent a significant amount of time and gained experience in industry. And we cannot take it lightly. I would like to emphasize that the disputes goes into crores and hundreds and thousands of crores at times, and the parties are looking for a neutral court like setup. And if we were to act as an arbitrator, we have to build in that skill set to be able to apply not only our financial and commercial understanding, but also understanding of the law, what the Arbitration Act all is all about, how to run a process of arbitration, and how to render an award which would stand the test if it goes further and it is challenged in the court of law. So the first role and the first thing that comes to my mind is chartered accounting acting as arbitrator. There are multiple forums. There where you can register as yourself and get empaneled, but you have to do a lot of homework before that, as to understanding, gaining credentials. There are a lot of bodies who train the arbitrators. There's Chartered Institution of Arbitration. There is ICAI who has courses, and then there are several other modes where you can equip yourself with your experience to become an arbitrator. So that is one route, and I will also touch a bit more detail as we progress further. But at an overall level, that would be one channel that is very much open for chartered accountants. The next is mediator and conciliator. So as you would recall, as I was telling earlier, that there are multiple ways within the arbitration, within alternate dispute resolution, where CAs, where matters can be handled. One was arbitration, but then there was mediation and conciliation as well. Now, mediation, and this is a slightly relaxed route as compared to arbitration, because there is a mediator who is mediating between two parties. So it is not as formal as arbitration being governed under by rule, but a mediator trying to bring the dispute to a settlement. And this is where there's a lot of work that comes to chartered accountants, and mediation is also gaining traction. Now government feels, and if you look at from an Indian scenario and from my experience, a lot of these disputes also arise from transaction that happens between private and public entity or a government entity. Now even these go into arbitration. There are arrangements wherein players are identified, as part of their concession agreement, as part of their contract, as part of their tenders, that if the matters there is a dispute, the matter will be handled as in an arbitration and not as a formal court. Because even the in government entities have realized that that's a process that will take a lot of time, that will disrupt work, that will disrupt future projects. So if imagine now government entities also opting for alternate dispute mechanism, which proves that there is a clear push. Now, why I raise this point is if you look at mediation, now there has been a recent law or recent direction by some of the government entities that we will, beyond a certain level of dispute, we will always go into mediation. And this is because they feel that arbitration, because a lot of arbitration require, heavy handed involvement of lawyers, technical matters, and judges who may or may not have experience of complex construction infrastructure matters, etc. It really does never gives a fair playing field according to them, which may or may not be correct. It is debatable, but now they have come up with a direction that for all the matters, the those entities are being directed to look for mediation as a settlement mechanism. Now, when a matter goes into mediation, you always need a well-informed party to help the disputees make sense of what the pros and cons of the argument are. And as chartered accountants, we do it day in, day out, be it with our audit clients, be it through other advisory work that we do for certain kinds of dispute which lies within our experience. We are very very well equipped to help parties understand, come to a negotiation table, show them what is right, what is pros and cons of what they are trying to argue, and help them come to a solution and guide it. And this is very important, and this is where, a lot of CAs can play a role. There are a lot of family disputes regarding, businesses, split of business, how certain brands can be used by certain family members or certain brothers within a large family. All of these matters not necessarily go to court or arbitration, but they want to be mediated in a forum where they both feel heard, where a justifiable and a just solution can be arrived at. So mediation and conciliation is a slightly easier form of arbitration, where where we have the right skill sets, and in the right kind of disputes we can play a very very critical role. Again, how do we become a mediator is obviously this is a sort slightly wider field where you need to have connects, understand. But there are mediation standards, there are mediation centers, and there are mediation institutes who also empanel mediators within their roster. And that is where again you could be empaneled, have an understanding of mediation act, have an understanding of negotiation, which we do from our daily lives, and apply it in a different context of an alternate dispute resolution. The next one is on being an expert. To be honest, this is the field where I spend my professional career in, and this is something that is really booming in the sense of acceptance, and may not necessarily be in case of ADR, but when there is a dispute, we can also be involved from the parties side, right? They would eventually want to understand, and that's where the finance department comes into the picture. What is the money impact? All the disputes, mostly, more often than not, boil down to the loss of money, or they involve some sort of money lost in a certain manner. Now, it is where, there is imperative, there is a finance professional involved to quantify or even outline what that impact or what the money loss is. So, what is an expert in context of alternate dispute resolution? An expert is an independent expert that comes in and provides its opinion, independent opinion, as to given the fact of the matters, what would the output be. Let's say there is a, and let me take you an example, and there is a dispute between two parties. Uh, let's say there was a cement plant that was set up, and the customer entered into an agreement that I will buy, X amount of cements, guaranteed X amount of cement each year for the next 10 years. So that particular cement plant owner expanded its capacity to cater to that demand. Now this contract is in place, it is agreed between the parties, the business is continuing as usual. Imagine 3 year down the line, the buyer stops purchasing. The other cement plant owner had already invested the money, had already a line in place, and had an entire cash flow planned for future. But because of this stopping of purchase by the party, a committed purchase at that, there is a issue or there is a loss that the cement manufacturer would suffer. Yes. So now who will say what that loss is? There more often than not, that is the role of an independent expert, where they come in and quantify what is the loss that, let's say in this case, cement manufacturer has suffered. Be it a share valuation, when there is minorities being said that the value of share is X, but minority feels the appropriate valuation should be more, or may not be minority, but either of the parties feel the same. Then there is always a valuation expert who comes in and says, okay, this, considering all the facts, this is the valuation. And this could be multiple situations where you need an independent party, an independent expert, technical expert, to come and guide the parties, and more than the parties, the tribunal who's deciding as to what is the right amount that should be looked at. Now, why do I say tribunal? If there is no CA in the tribunal, they would all for sure need an expert of a CA to understand and to come to a conclusion. So if there is no financial, financial a judge with a financial knowledge in the tribunal, and the matter relates to a financial issue, the parties would put forward their claim, but judge would eventually want to know what is the right amount between the two. And if they don't have that valuation skill, they would need an independent party, independent expert to support them. So as an expert, your role as a chartered accountant will always be towards the tribunal, while you might be hired by either of the party or even by the tribunal to help them to come to a conclusion. So this is a role where there is significant impact that a chartered accountant can play. A chartered accountant, how now coming to the theme of how you become an expert. Now it is again, it is something like, how do you do audit, how do you do valuation? You have to, it is a course where you have done again and again, you professionally practice that. It is a kind of professional work that you've been doing over the years, so you have gained some expertise because you know how it works technically, number one. Number two, you know what the issues are and how to quantify, or let's say how to value them based on your academic experience and professional experience. Number three, you are able to summarize it in a concise manner for the reader, so that it is easily perceived by a person who does not have equivalent financial knowledge, and you are able to convey the complexity of all what you are dealing with in a very simplistic manner to the reader of your, let's say, expert report. Now, how do you become an expert? Who hires you? That is the important part. Right now you have the expertise, but let's say there are multiple ways. One, these institutions that I've spoken about also panels experts, financial expert, technical expert, civil engineering experts. So one is to get enlisted. Two, when there is a dispute, either of the parties hire you as an expert because they know know of you and of your work that you have done in similar matters, similar other contexts for those clients. uh, Three, you are you empanel yourself with various institution as certain critical let's say valuation domain or etc., where you position yourself as experts and you demonstrate that you've done X amount of work as expert in that field. So the work as an expert could come from various direction, be it from being empaneled at a particular institution or organization, much like what a register valuers or a merchant bankers get. But this is entirely different context, but it needs your expertise. Two, you are hired by either of the parties who know that you have the expertise, and you bring in that expertise in this current context of dispute. And three, you make yourself available in various forums to be selected as an expert. And lastly, the being expert is just not the technical side of it. An expert role is a very critical role, in the sense that you cannot be biased. If you are an independent expert, even if you're being paid by one party, eventually your responsibility, your accountability is towards the judges or the tribunal whom you are serving. So you have to be independent. You should be able to stand the test of testimony. Now, what is the test of testimony? Suppose, as an expert, you have given a report. The other side can always challenge, right? Let's say you've given a valuation report. Now, other side would say, okay, you have given a valuation report as a CA, but here's my CA who thinks that this valuation is incorrect, and here are the reasons. And now that is where you have to be uh, just follow the technical standards to justify your solution that you have come to. You will be asked rigorous question on your independence, your technical capability, your ability to come to that solution, and whether that solution is correct. And you should be able to defend that. And that is very important, because you're being called an expert. An expert should be able to justify its position. So this is a area where there is a lot of attraction. There is a lot of momentum, where CAs are more often than not required. When their cost is not a big consideration, all parties look for experts to come to understand, and provide a credible position to the tribunal, and help them come to a solution which is appropriate, and which is clearly quantifying, highlighting, coming to a solution for the underlying issues between the parties. The next one is forensics auditor. Again, this is the line of work that we already do. Like, some of us already are into forensics investigation, who understand how accounting fraud works and how to identify them. uh, Now, if there is a dispute, suppose there is an international party who feels their counterpart in India have done some fraud, there is cash defalcation, there is some sort of breach of non-compete, or some sort of untoward business that the Indian JV partner is doing or Indian partner is doing, the matter would go into dispute, and they would always need a forensic auditor, a forensics investigator, to come to the bottom of the issue as to whether there is a perpetrated fraud, what is the trail, who is at fault, what is the impact. So this is a very another field of expertise that falls within ADR, where there are disputes and there are requirement for forensics assessment, uh, be it accounting fraud, be it other frauds which a chartered accountant could uncover. I'm not going into cyber and all those require different skill set, but those within which are within our domain. Uh, this is where there is a critical role. There are a lot of CCI matters, competition commission matters, where the government feels that there have been, a breach of practices by certain players, breach of dominant position, and so on and so forth. There has been financial irregularities, and all these matters also at times require forensics experts to decipher and come to the bottom of things. So, within the domain of alternate dispute resolution, forensics investigator is also a critical player, because more often than not, some of the disputes will involve some angle of mistrust, some level of, things which have not gone according to the most ethical or legal manner, or there has been some breach of trust or obligation. So this is another field where, people who have experience in forensics could position themselves. How it's the same route, you have to be empaneled as expert, you have to be approached by either the clients or the tribunal, you have to be associated with these bodies as experts to be able to get get rolling, get yourself hello, can you hear me? I think there's Mayank, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah, I got a meeting being recorded notification. Anyways, so continuing, so I was saying that, as an advisor also, there are a lot of instances where, Mayank, could you mute yourself? I think there's background noise. Um, so, there could be, you could come in as advisor and support your client's case and support them behind the curtains, in the sense that you not necessarily any of come, and there'll always in understanding of different critical aspects. To put a Venn diagram will fall in the very center of to add value up in this ecosystem. The next one is on, niche expertise, more so in certain kinds of disputes where we could virtually be irreplaceable, be it complex financial disputes, accounting matters relating to cash flows, working capital, valuation. Those are right up our alley. No one can do better than us.
The participants are requested to stay tuned. The speaker is joining in a short while. There is some network issue. Meanwhile, if you have questions, you can put in question answer Q&A tab. So sir will respond to it. IC offers certification course on alternate dispute resolutions covering arbitration, mediation, conciliation, and this is a 30 CPRs structured course. One of the question was asked that is being replied. So, as we conclude today's seminar, we express our gratitude to Neeraj Kochar for his valuable insight on areas. Though due to technical issues, some of the content is left out. So, we will arrange another session for that. And we especially thanks the session chairman in absentia and vice chairman, both Avij Hajir ji and uh, vice chairman also. C. Pramodji Jain. And with this, I thank all the participants for their active participation. We are concluding the meeting. Thank you.